Oh, hello! My name is Mara, and welcome to Books Like Whoa. So I've got the third video in my DNF little series we've got going here, and today we are talking about reasons why I DNF a series. So we talked about why I DNF an individual book, we've talked about why I will DNF an author and his or her oeuvre, and now we're going to talk about like series that I don't finish and some reasons why I haven't and if I can think of them examples. So let's get into this. So the first and probably most prominent reason why I will not finish a series is if I read the first book and do not like it. So this is, different slightly than DNFing an individual book, because in this situation I'm thinking of ones where I did finish the first book, but I didn't like the first book and therefore didn't continue in the series. I think probably the best example of that would be The Magicians that I can think of right now, because I hated that book. I really did not like it. Quentin is a whiny little weaselly baby who is the fucking worst, and I didn't want to spend any more time with him or that world, and I felt like, sorry, rant about The Magicians. I also felt like it was so derivative and then like smug and like whatever about the works that it was being derivative of. So like it clearly had a very strong disdain for the philosophical underpinnings of the Chronicles of Narnia, which like is fair, but like it copied Narnia basically, versus something like Philip Pullman. I've never finished that series, but like His Dark Materials, that whole thing. He also is clearly critiquing some of the stuff like philosophically that's happening with Narnia, like they're antithetical in terms of like underlying worldview, but he's not like ripping Narnia off. Do you know what I mean? Versus The Magicians feels like, what's his face? Lev Grossman is just like ripping Narnia off and is like, no, I don't like the point of view you're coming. It's like, okay, you may not like what C.S. Lewis believes, but you literally are stealing from him and like not doing it well, and this isn't interesting, and like you don't know how to, anyway, sorry. Did not like that book and really didn't appreciate how, in my opinion, unoriginal and smug it was about being unoriginal. So anyway, I read the first book. All that to say, I read the first book in that series and was like, fuck no, I'm not reading any more of this. An example of, sorry, I didn't know I had in me that rant about The Magicians, but apparently I needed to workshop that, so thank you. An example of when I DNF'd a first book and therefore also ended up DNFing the series because I was like, I don't want to continue in this, is Nevernight. I did that recently, so that was a first book and I didn't like it and DNF'd it, so yeah, not gonna keep reading. So my next reason to DNF a series is that I finished the first book, but determined that it was too high risk to continue. And what I mean by that is I have a strong, and I don't know if I've talked about this a little bit, but I have a strong preference to start series once they are near or at the end of their writing, because I'm just impatient and I tend to like to binge series. So like when possible, I love it if there's a long running series that I can read like 3, 4, 5, 10, 20, however many there are, and like polish it off or get up to date at a series that is like winding down. That tends to be my preference because that's just my reading style, is I like binging. So that being said, I also have kind of a trepidity? I'm not sure what the noun form of that word is. Trepidation, there you go. Anyway, I have trepidation, how about that, towards series that are getting started, because I always have this underlying fear that they're either going to get bad or they're not going to get finished. And the classic example of a series that I did not continue in because I was like, I don't believe that this is going to get done, I don't think this is going to get finished, is Game of Thrones. I read the first book, I read Game of Thrones. What is that series actually called? Oh, A Song of Ice and Fire, right? So, okay. So I read Game of Thrones, the first book in the A Song of Ice and Fire series. And I was like, okay, this is good. Like, I get why people are into this. This is well written. Like, this is good. But I have very low confidence that this will get finished before the author dies. Like I just said it. Okay, there you go. I do not think that J.R.R. Martin is going to live to see the end of that series. And I would be like pissed and then also feel like a bad person if he died and I was like, where is my book? So I just don't want to go there. Like, it was good, but not good enough for me to take that level of risk. So yeah, so that's the second reason, is books, series I'm not going to finish because I think that continuing on in them is too high risk in terms of either quality or them getting finished. Okay, so the third reason is that I finished the first book and I liked it fine, but I didn't like it enough to continue in a series, which I think is probably maybe the most frequent reason why I DNF a series, is that it's almost like a DNF of accident, because the first book doesn't make enough of an impression on me for me to like stay on top of noticing when there's more releases happening. Usually if I finish a first book, especially if it's a series that's already been out for a while, I immediately go figure out if I'm going to continue. I figure out what the next book is, like I put it in my Goodreads, like I make a mental plan to get to that at some point. And if I don't do that, like if I can't be bothered to try to do that, that probably means I'm not going to end up finishing that series, because I'm just going to forget about it, or, you know, there's an off chance that someone will bring it up and I'll be like, oh yeah, I should keep going with that. So I can't think, again, because they tend to be pretty forgettable first books, I can't really think of a lot of good examples of that. I will say an exception to that rule was the Kate Daniel series, which is probably my favorite series that's running right now, because I don't think the first book is super strong, and I almost didn't continue in that series, but I accidentally read a novella from that series and loved it, and that's the only reason why I picked up the second book. So that's an exception to the rule, but maybe an example is possibly The Queen's Rising. So I read that recently and actually enjoyed it. I'm not sure that I'm going to, did I put it in Goodreads? Yeah, okay, I actually did mark it in Goodreads, so maybe I will pay enough attention to keep going with it, but it's the type of series that I would forget to keep going with, because I enjoyed the book fine, but it wasn't like, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen next? So yeah, I think sometimes if the first book doesn't end with some sort of major, like what's gonna happen next, it's also sometimes hard to remember to keep going with it. Like Truly Devious has a huge cliffhanger at the end of the first book, and you're just like, Maureen, the fuck? Like, why did you do this to me? I need the next book and it doesn't come out for a year. So like that's, you know, very mean to the audience, but like a good strategy on the author's part if they can have some sort of major question or major plot point hanging, because it does sort of incentivize you to be like, okay, like give me that next book, I'm ready to take it. So if you don't do that, or if the first book just isn't compelling enough, yeah, there's a good chance I might forget about it. Sorry. So the number 4 reason I had down of why I may not finish a series is that I've heard that the series gets worse. So we all know that this happens, especially in series that get real long. An example, this is a series I've actually never read because I've heard about this series so much, but I've heard that the Anita Blake vampire series is very much like this, by Laurel K. Hamilton. Apparently the first few books are actually really good, and then it like devolves into some sort of weird orgy thing for the rest of the books. That series may even still be going, but like if I've heard that the series will get worse, even if I enjoyed the first book or two that I read in it, there's a good chance I'm just gonna stop reading because I'm like, okay, I'm good. Like sometimes what I'll do is look up a plot synopsis for the rest, or like a series synopsis to find out kind of ultimately what happens. I've said this before, I'll say it again, I'm very much a how reader, not a what reader. So if I find out just like sort of perfunctorily like, oh, this is what happens, that satisfies whatever like lingering questions I have, and I don't need to be bothered to find out how, because yeah, the how is what makes me want to read, and if I don't have that, then, you know, I'll just take the what and keep going on my way. So, yeah, if I've heard that the series just gets significantly worse, a lot of times I'll do enough research to find out where that happens, which we'll talk about in my next reason. I'll find out where that starts happening, and then I will stop. I will abandon ship after the last good book. So yeah, that's another reason why I will DNF a series. Number 5 is I've heard that the series gets boring in the middle. So going back to doing some research and finding out where that happens, a great example of a series I did this with was True Blood. And I'm actually really happy I did this. So side note on True Blood, the True Blood series, or I guess it's the Sookie Stackhouse novels, whatever they're called, by Charlene Harris. I read the first book, put the series down, got sick about 2 years later, picked up the series and binged them all in like a week. And in that first book, people lose their shit about the ending of True Blood. This is a tangent on this series. People get so mad about it. Literally in the first book, I was like, oh, okay, I know who she ends up with. Like, it was very clear in the first book who the author thought she should be with. So I'm not sure why people were so, like, shocked or felt like it wasn't supported in the text. Because, like, again, if you just read the first book, knowing what the ending is, like, she makes it pretty clear that's where things are going. So that's a side note. come at me. I'm sure some people really disagree with that. But anyway, I was actually really happy with the ending. But what I heard, so I'd heard that the, what was it? Books like 10, 11, and 12 or something were not good. And I heard that the last book was also not good. So what I did was I think I read to about a book 9. I read some summaries of what happened. I got the last book and read the last few chapters just to like read the ending for myself because I wanted to have an opinion on it, and called it a day. Like, that is how I consumed that particular series. So like if I hear that it gets boring or bad in the middle, then like that is what I will do. So yeah, I know that doesn't work for everyone, but for me, that's been a very effective strategy to get the maximum enjoyment from the series and not have the regrets that the people who feel compelled to read every single book end up having about the series. Because like, yeah, it can ruin your opinion if you suffer through something that you're not enjoying. So I get to maintain all the positive associations that I have with the True Blood series, enjoy it for the nonsense that it is, and I didn't have to suffer through all the weird, like those 3 or 4 weird books towards the end. And on a related note, another reason why I might abandon ship on a series is if it takes some sort of terrible turn. So I'm trying to think of an example where this happened that I've read, and I can't think of one off the top of my head. But I know that there have been series where something happens and I'm just like, fuck you. Like, usually it has something to do with like really selling out a character. So like if they, what's a good example? Oh, so if what J.K. Rowling did to Hermione in The Cursed Child had happened in the middle of Harry Potter, I would have 100% bailed on that series because I was not here for how the character of Hermione got treated in that book in terms of one of the alternative timelines and what it said about her character. Like, I was really, really unhappy with that. And if that happened like in book 3 or 4 where I wasn't as emotionally invested as you are by the end of that series, don't get me wrong, I was still very invested in that series at that point. But like, I'm just saying, like, if something happens early enough in a series where you're just like, what? That is totally a reason to stop reading. I guess that somewhat is true of The Magician, see my earlier rant, because there is an unacknowledged rape in that book, and the author shows no awareness that rape has really happened, or like there's no indication from the book in terms of authorial attitude that there's a recognition that that was a thing and that that was like a choice. It was like, oh, I don't really understand what consent is and the fact that this was a horrifying situation I just set up. So something like that is something that will just make me be like, nah, I'm out. I'm not into this. And then my final reason why I would DNF a series is that I just kind of lose steam. So it's not that the books are getting worse. It's not, like, this is very much a case of like, it's not you, it's me. Where I just sort of like lose interest in the series, or I just don't have enough like oomph to get through them. Or you know what often it is, because here's an example. I stopped reading the Susan Mallory Fool's Gold series towards the end. I don't even know if those are still happening or not. They might be. That was actually the series that pretty much got me into popular romance. So it's a little sad that I stopped reading them after a while, but they were very samey and in a way that is comforting to some degree. But for me, I just sort of had reached my full level on that particular story because it was roughly the same story happening over and over again, which I like repetition in popular fiction. Like, I don't have a problem with a formula. I don't have a problem with like predictability and kind of knowing what you're getting from a series. Like, I actually like that, but I just had sort of like had enough of that particular version of small town romance. And so I said, oh, okay, like, I'm good. Like, I don't need to keep going. I have gotten this plot enough times that I am satisfied. Thank you. Good night. Enjoy your life in Fool's Gold townspeople who I have enjoyed up to this point. So yeah, that's more of just sort of a case of like, I lost steam on the series, and not that anything terrible happened with it or like the author did anything wrong. It just sort of like personally, I'm like, no, I'm good. So yeah, I think that's most of the reasons why I DNF series. Maybe I'll think of more later, but I think that pretty much covers reasons why I stopped reading. But yeah, let me know some of the reasons you might stop reading a series if you agree, disagree. And yeah, I think maybe at some point I might do a how to DNF a book video, just to like a manifesto, if you will, of why DNFing is amazing and you should embrace it. I may do that at some point if I can get my thoughts together. But anyway, sorry, I keep playing with my journal's little And I bet you can hear that, sorry. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, follow me on the social medias if you are so inclined. I have all that information listed in the description box below. And I think that will do it. I hope you're having a really great day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!